Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Food Safety Future, Learning from Recalls. I'm Nithya Caleb, editor at Annex Business Media, Canada's largest B2B media company, and I'm here as your host on behalf of Food in Canada. Before I introduce today's panelists, I have a few housekeeping details to go through. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Biomera, your trusted partner in augmented diagnostics. In close partnership with customers, Biomera has worked with leading global food and beverage companies to develop their augmented diagnostics approach. This innovative approach enhances the precision and effectiveness of safety and quality control programs throughout the entire production value chain and enables their customers to anticipate emerging risks and take full control of their operations. Augmented diagnostics is a combination of cutting-edge testing technologies covering microbiology and molecular biology, and the latest data science and genomic capabilities, all pioneered by Biomera's innovative spirit. Thanks, Biomera, for your help in making this webinar possible. To our participants, if you're watching along with us, the audience is in listen-only mode. We will be taking questions throughout the discussion, so feel free to drop a question at any time using the Q&A button on your Zoom window. We are also recording today's session, and all registered participants will get an email with a link to the recording in the next few days. With that, I'd like to welcome our panelists. Amanda Cox is an accomplished professional in the food safety and quality assurance sector, currently serving as Director of Food Safety and Quality Assurance at Maple Leaf Foods. Prior to Maple Leaf Foods, she was Director of Food Safety and Quality for Pinnacle Foods and Fiji Water, and served in various food safety and quality roles at Heinz and Hormel. Dr. Amy Prow is Professor and Academic Program Coordinator of Culinary Innovation and Food Technology at Niagara College. She specializes in innovation and change management practices for food safety and food manufacturing systems. Amy is the founder of Food and Beverage Innovation Center at Niagara College, which supports small business capacity building for innovation. Megan Griffin is Acting Manager, Process Management and Liaison, Office of Food Safety and Recall, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Megan has a bachelor's degree in biology from Carleton University. She started her career at Health Canada as a scientific evaluator in 2009. She worked on microbiological health risk assessments and drafted policies and regulatory documents on food safety. Griffin later joined CFIA as Food Safety and Recall Specialist. For these past 8 years, she has been leading and coordinating food safety investigation and outbreak response, working with other federal, provincial, and internal partners. Laurent Delay is the CEO and co-founder of Inodal, a company dedicated to developing and producing innovative solutions to inhibit microbiological pathogens. With a background in biotechnological engineering from the University of Sherbrooke and a master's degree in food science from Laval University, Laurent combines technical expertise with entrepreneurial vision. Following his academic journey, he founded Inodal to address food safety challenges with innovative, science-backed solutions. His work focuses on bridging the gap between academic research and practical applications in the food industry, helping manufacturers improve safety, extend shelf life, and reduce recalls. His company, Inodal, has won several entrepreneurship and innovation competitions, including the prestigious Innovation Award from the Governor General of Canada in 2024. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. I'd like to share a brief background here before we start the discussion. As all of you know, Canada is one of the world's strongest food safety standards. But a spate of recalls last year, including the recall of several plant-based beverages, has raised questions about the effectiveness of our food safety system. So that's why we're meeting here today. And our panelists are experts in this field, and I'm sure they have a lot of insights on how we can continue to lead the world in food safety. So without further delays, I'd like to start the discussion. Now, first off, I want to address the elephant in the room. It's been like a minute or two into the webinar, and I haven't said the T word, but we have to speak about that, and we have to speak about the neighbors south to our south. We all know the US is changing its policies as it relates to food safety. So I want to know and hear from all the panelists, what does that mean for companies selling into the US? Maybe I'll start off with Amanda.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Nithya. For Maple Leaf, there really are no changes, right? We're committed to be compliant to regulations in all of the countries that we export to and do business in. We do have manufacturing locations both in Canada and the United States. And so we will continue to pay attention to any changes that happen and make sure that we are compliant.
Thank you, Amanda. Amy, what do you think? How, what does it mean for us and our manufacturers?
So in Canada, most of our manufacturing leans towards the small and medium-sized businesses. And these are companies that don't necessarily have the same bench strength that some of our larger businesses, such as Maple Leaf, would have in terms of the regulatory affairs. And so there's a lot of scramble right now to say, what are some of these compliance issues that are going to be in place with the United States? We've already seen this with changing legislation with respect to food additives, erythrocin being recently banned, and small companies are now in a scramble saying we now have to go through reformulation. Many of these small companies in Canada are acting as co-manufacturers and de-risking fabrication for US companies. And as such, that whole scramble is going to be really interesting because like any R&D cycle, it takes weeks, sometimes months to get your supply chain in place, to get your ingredients tested and any shelf life considerations in place. And so there's all of these different concerns. We see that Health and Human Services and the Food and Drug Administration are going through rapid changes with some of the food additives and processing aids that are permitted within food products and changes to GRAS status. And that's going to have, again, major implications on reformulation.
Thank you, Amy. Lahan, I know you were at the Seafood Expo just a couple of days ago, so you probably have more first-hand insight into this. So
yeah,
please.
well, in terms of regulation, yes, it's changed. I think that in the past months, it's been changing every day. There's something new. There's something to adapt. People were trying to react, but every day there's something new. So for now, I think for most of the food processors that we meet in Canada, it's just kind of a wait and see game because every day there's new regulation. Every day there's a new tariff, and the next day it gets removed. So everybody's just dancing and trying to see like where do we stand, how do we proceed. And interesting enough, like when we were at the Boston Seafood Show, the tariff discussion were really among us Canadians. For the US, well, not concerned for most of the US based company right now. It's mostly like a lot of talk, not a lot of acting. Nobody's happy about it clearly in the whole business sector. So still for now, as of today, wait and see because it's changing every day, and that's the hard part right now. It's just the uncertainty. Like we don't know, we can't progress because we don't know where we stand basically.
Sure. Thanks, Lahan. Megan, you're from CFIA. I mean, I just want to add, with these policy changes, I don't know if there's any changes with FDA, your working relationship. I don't know if there's any changes. And also, if I may ask, I mean, do we need to be concerned about the kind of food that we import from the US if there's changes that's happening at the policy level there? What are your thoughts?
Well, of course, here at the CFI, we take our role seriously in protecting food safety, plant and animal health. I think this is a good time for companies, Canadian companies, to show leadership and just to stay in line with any type of new requirements that come up, not just for the US, but with all countries, right? So it could be new licensing, certification, like Dr. Prue mentioned, changes in product formulation when it comes time to exporting food to the US or other countries as well. But I do want to say that we are very confident in our food safety system, and there is no concern. So all food that is imported into Canada must meet the same standards, food safety standards, as food manufactured here in Canada as well. So we do have a lot of steps in place to protect Canadians, from monitoring program to inspections. We have enforcement tools. I'm sure we'll be getting into more details later in this webinar, but as of right now, there is no reason to be concerned.
Yeah.
Much,
Thanks, Megan. Go
much
ahead.
of the legislation in Canada has put the onus on the establishment taking the primary responsibility for food safety management, and that the CFIA then does compliance and enforcement as a secondary measure. We also have really strong third-party audit requirements from Global Food Safety Initiative. And this is very similar within the United States. The Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, as it's commonly called, put the onus on the food companies themselves to have their preventive control programs in place and managed predominantly by the establishment and not put the emphasis on the government. And so we have to put our trust that companies are trying to do the right thing. Now, we've seen incidents like what happened at Boar's Head, where companies did completely let things completely fall off of the radar. But for the most part, everything is working as it's supposed to. Companies don't want to be putting themselves into a risky situation by making mistakes, and so they're using this multi-layer approach.
Thanks, Amy. And I think, to talk to that, it is one of our USPs, right? This is one of the things that distinguishes Canadian food companies from other companies in the world. I know, Amanda, for Maple Leaf, that's something that you really strive to take a lot of steps into making sure what you produce is safe and with minimal recalls as possible, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Maple Leaf is a proud Canadian manufacturer, and we go above and beyond what the requirements are. We also do not think that food safety is a competitive advantage. And so we want to make sure that we have forums for the industry to share their knowledge and learnings, especially when events do occur. That way we can all kind of learn from each other's experiences and implement best practices to make sure that the food supply is safe for all Canadians and for all of our consumers that we produce food for.
Lohan, what do you think?
Oh, I love what the comment from and of course, like food safety is not a competitive edge. We've seen the recall. Every time there's a recall in an industry, it affects the whole ecosystem as well. When you have a recall in dairy product, it's the whole industry that is affected through that. So I think like there's a huge step to be made like in sharing those learning right now. And because once again, like every time there's a recall, it's the whole ecosystem that gets absolutely shaken.
That's true. Megan, I mean, from the CFI perspective, I mean, is this something that is that something that you constantly keep telling manufacturers about how our systems are helpful? It's helps us. I know they don't speak about it not being a competitive advantage because it's simply something that you need to do, right? It's the basic benchmark. But when we look at it at a global level, the standard that we have is way, way higher than other countries, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like like my colleagues here, from academia and from industry are saying we all work together, right? So us regulators, producers, industry, academia, it really is kind of a group effort to make food safe for Canadians and for all consumers. As you're aware, in Canada, we had the SFCR, the Safe Food for Canadian regulations. And they've been around for over 5 years now, since 2019. So those regulations, they were made, and so they require manufacturers and producers to assess the hazard in their own production process and to also have preventative control plans in place as well. So there's several of them, but those are some of the main points, like the other panelists were saying.
Thank you. I just want to, bring out something that Amy spoke about and something that I want to discuss as well. So, as I mentioned in my introduction, opening remarks, we had some major recalls, and to the industry, we know a recall means the system is working, but to consumers, that's not necessarily the perception. So my question is, are we in a food safety crisis? Is the system working as it should, or what's happening? Let me start with Amy.
Sure, I'll jump in because I am one of the columnists that work with Nithya, and I wrote about the establishment-based risk assessment model and the challenges that had when it came to the recent Jariki non-dairy milk substitute recall with Listeria. how the CFIA has operated over the past few years has been using a risk assessment tool. And so establishments would go in and rank some of the different profiles for their products. What are some of the safety scenarios? What are some of the preventive control programs that are being implemented? What sort of environmental monitoring is in place? And each company was to self-register and put their information into the database, which then linked back out to the CFIA's frequency for inspection. Now, the company was SFCR licensed, and that implies that they are putting in preventive controls and are intended to manage those themselves. Also, third-party licensed with the GFSI initiative, and so they had an extensive preventive control driven, HACCP driven food safety management program in place, and still there's a major listeria incident with this. Something that was discovered in this process was within the ERA model, from some of the investigations that were done by the Globe and Mail, the ERA model is self-directed. And when people are self-directed, they have the tendency either, one, sometimes they choose the least risk option when going through any sort of decision-making tree. But secondly, if you're a small company and you do not have a lot of bench strength when it comes to food safety management and risk assessment, you may not know exactly what you're filling out. And we remind ourselves, most of the companies in Canada are small businesses, and they don't necessarily have a high level of expertise. Many times they're dealing with consultants. Those consultants in general are wonderful people and highly skilled, but they're spread thin. And so again, what I didn't find this, the Globe and Mail found that a large percentage of companies had indicated that they were very lowest risk category while they were doing high risk processing operations. And that, I think, is one of the issues. Going back to Nithya's comment though, are we in a crisis? No. What we know about food safety is that most of the time the programs are working as they should be. And companies are not doing this with malintent. They're doing it with great intention, and they're not negligent about what they're trying to do. They're very intentional. And the challenge is that food safety incidents do sometimes happen. And this is one of the things that keeps a lot of us food safety people up at night, that an incident is going to happen. There's going to be a freak accident, and we are trying our very, very best. Let's contrast that to the Boar's Head scenario, where inspection had been in, they had identified non-compliance. This is in Boar's Head, for those of you who do not know, was a Virginia-based company, huge listeria outbreak. Inspection had been in, they had identified non-compliances, and the company did not correct the non-compliances, continued to perpetuate the non-compliances, and then listeria happened. Very different story.
Thanks, Amy. Oh, I'm glad I'm in Canada right now. Megan, I just want to bring in, I mean, Amy brought this up, so maybe it's best for you to respond to the comments that she made. I mean, you are from CFI, so I've, kind of, we are asking you this question, but, is the system working as it should be?
Mhm. No, that's right. What Dr. Prue mentioned is, yeah, you explained it very well, but a short answer is no. I don't think that we are in a food crisis. So at CFI, we do monitor any type of food safety concern trends, recall trends. In my group where I work, we are the ones that kind of monitor the different recalls, class 1, 2s, or 3s, which level they go to. We look at data over the past 5 years, and there has not been an increase in recalls for either allergens or micro issues like listeria at all as well. So the trend is not going upward. So there is no crisis. As per the outbreak last year, that really was a tragedy. Sorry, but yeah, the ERA model, so the establishment-based risk assessment model, there's been a lot of work going into that in the past year since that outbreak. And as previously announced by the CFIA, our Inspector General's office is doing a report to identify any type of changes, to do a review and to better inform the model. And I know that in the next coming weeks or months, that report or a review from the Inspector General's office will be shared with the public.
Thank you, Megan, for that update. Amanda, as for someone who's in the food safety industry and with Maple Leaf Foods, who did go through something similar in 2008, do you, what is your sense? I mean, do you feel the system is working as it is? Are there any changes?
I do feel like the system is working. And I think this was referenced earlier by some of the other panelists that much of the onus for compliance and for food safety is on the producers themselves, right? Really understanding from a hazard analysis standpoint, the ingredients you're bringing in, the process that you have in place, and what potential hazards exist, and what are the appropriate controls to mitigate those risks. So a lot of it really does come back down to the manufacturer and understanding the product and process. Yeah, I don't think we're in a crisis. I think now probably the industry is much better in finding problems and identifying problems. But like Megan said, the data doesn't suggest that there are any more now than there have been for the past 5 years.
Good to know. Thanks, Amanda. Lohan, what do you think?
Well, I can only agree with everyone else. There's no crisis right now. I think one thing is interesting to see, like it would be in crisis if it was always like recalls or incident in one industry and it was repeating itself and there was no correction being made. The recall that we saw in Canada and the US, the interesting part that happened was there was recall in plenty of different industry, waffles, deli meats, cheese, plant-based. So a variety of product. And one thing that led to, I mean, let's say it seems that we have more recall is the fact that there's a lot of industry that didn't assess this, for example, the listeria risk because they assumed that the listeria risk for them was very low. Let's take waffles, best example. You wouldn't assume that waffles would be a high risk product for listeria. But the risk assessment has evolved. We're testing now more and more. And when we test, we find that's the thing. So I think right now the system is working because we're testing and we are finding it compared to before just assuming that the risk was none or low and not testing. And when we don't test, of course, we won't find a problem. I think we saw also the same reality in veggies when there was a huge recall from romaine lettuce coming from California and Arizona, where we never looked that much for listeria in those products, but at the same time, so it's a high-risk product, comes from the ground, of course there's going to be listeria on it. So just changing that whole risk assessment meant that we're testing more, we're finding more. So the system is working, it's just I understand that for the consumer, seems like a lot, seems like there's incident right now because we are finding, I think the reality is it was there already from the beginning. It's just that now we're able to get a real assessment of the risk in all categories of product compared to before where we only tested, like we assumed that listeria was a higher risk only for seafood, dairy meats. But no, listeria is there for, let's say, all ready-to-eat product. It's the same risk for all those categories, and now testing for it, we find it.
That's a good segue, Lauren, into my next question about what are some of the key lessons that these recalls are, that we're learning from it in terms of risk management, consumer trust, and business operations. You spoke about how these recalls are letting us know that a whole section of food groups are affected, not just a certain section. Are there any other lessons that we've learned from these recalls? Let me start with you, Laurent.
The thing that we saw, and like US is a very good example now because they had a lot of incidents in the last year for listeria. And the one thing that came out from all those industries was the risk post-cook step. In all ready-to-eat product, there's still a lot of industry where, yes, you have your kill step while cooking it, but then you have still a lot of manipulation of cutting, dicing, manipulation before final packaging. And then that's in all type of food product. And that's a big risk that where there was not a lot of, let's say, solution or mean except environmental, let's say, swabbing to make sure that, well, my environment work is clean and safe to work, but the risk is still there. You still have a lot of employees, a lot of training to put, a lot of rotation, and in all those recalls, that's the common point with all of them was a contamination from cross-contamination post-cook step right before packaging. So there's still that gap that still needs to be fixed and to have solution in between, because that's the common area where we had an incident that caused recall in all ready-to-eat area of the sector.
Thanks, Laurent. That's a valid point that you've raised. Amy, what are some of the other lessons that we have picked up or learned from these recalls?
I think one of the biggest lessons is reminding ourselves what resources are available to small businesses, because again, it's so complicated for many of these small businesses who are trying to launch a product and then have to implement a preventive control program. The fixed cost on implementing and delivering a preventive control program is quite high, and therefore they tend to be underinvested. They often are trying to multitask as business owners, then trying to implement their preventive control programs, and they're not subject matter specialists in microbiology and food safety. And so it's really important for there being educational resources, coaching and mentoring resources, centers like the technology access centers across the country that provide some of the educational and consulting support. But it's so vital that we appreciate the fact that Canada is dominated by small business, and the burden of regulation is quite high, and therefore how can we streamline that burden so that these small businesses can succeed at implementing their food safety programs?
Okay, thank you. The burden of regulation is quite high, but I also think that sometimes I feel it's if we need a proper a safe food, then sometimes regulations need to be complicated.
I agree.
Megan, I want to bring you in here. I mean, what are some of the lessons you think? And I know that particular recall is still under investigation, but in general, there are certain things that Laurent and Amy pointed out. Are there any other lessons that we could have learned and that we can share with our audience today?
I think some of the lessons here in our recall shop, our recall office that we've been working on the past year is even just risk communication and recall communication to consumers. Whenever we do have recalls, there has been some, I guess, high visibility ones, and it causes panic, right? Like, is it all eggs? Is it all plant-based beverages? And we always try as much as possible to make our communication tools better, so consumers know that it isn't a whole commodity, right? Like, it really is just a one specific code or combination of a code, UPS, and brand. And we really don't want to hurt a whole industry or a whole sector. So we always try to improve that and come out with better messaging. And even like in recent weeks and this week, we were trying to come out with tools for consumers too, on like how to properly read a food recall warning, like how to identify the product to see if you have it in your home. So those are some of the things that we've been working on here to help consumers.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, what are some of the lessons?
Yeah, so I'll speak specifically about Maple Leaf's recall from 2008.
Yeah.
Of course, we can't go back in time, but now, we want to share the lessons that we've learned and the things that we've done since to make sure that it never happens again. And one of the key learnings from that recall was really taking a look at our environmental monitoring program. So similar to what Laurent had to say, that is the highest risk area, especially with deli meats and other ready-to-eat items. And what we learned is that when you look at a piece of equipment, you want to make sure that you're breaking it down to the smallest pieces possible when you're doing your swabbing and your investigation. Some of that might not happen all of the time. And so really taking a robust look at your program, how you break down your equipment, how you clean your equipment, and the types of swabbing that you do. Another way that we've improved our environmental monitoring program was to do rinsate swabbing. So that's actually taking the rinse water from kind of the last step of cleaning before sanitizers applied, and sending that in for Listeria species identification. And if you can't, or it's a more complicated piece of equipment that you can't break down into smaller pieces, that rinsate information can actually inform a lot of decisions that you might make about that piece of equipment and potential contamination inside. Like maybe you need to look at alternative interventions, right, to take care of any Listeria harborage, such as steam tinting or other types of treatments.
Thank you, Amanda. I know there was a question in the chat about if there are a list of organizations that can support small businesses with preventive programs. Is there anything that comes to any of your top of your mind? I mean, do you want to share? I know Amy said she's happy to provide a list later on, but if there's something that you want to point our audience to, anyone?
Yeah, something that maybe isn't specific to small businesses, but all industry is the North American Meat Institute. So Maple Leaf has partnered with them on Listeria programming and Listeria training so that, you know, folks who might not have all of the resources available in their company can actually go externally into academia and into some of these supporting organizations to learn more about what the risks might be in their process and how to proactively go after them.
Thank you, Amanda.
I wrote in the chat that I love North American Meat Institute. They have some wonderful calculators for process lethality that I use extensively with the students at Niagara College. One of the organizations that I mentioned was the Technology Access Centers, and this is a network of centers across the country. It just happens that Niagara College hosts one of them in food and beverage innovation, and these are within colleges. And the idea being small business can reach out to these technology access centers. A number of them are focused on food and beverage, Niagara College in particular, a little bit of self-promotion here. And we are able to provide consultation services. Some of them are fee for service and some of them are funded by the government. One of the government programs in particular, and this is accessible for all Canadian companies, is IRAP, the Industrial Research Assistance Program. And IRAP almost all the time has these short-term consulting vouchers available, and that allows an expert from a higher education institution to go in and provide some short-term consulting to the small business. And of course, that could be on food safety. It could be on any number of process technologies or automation, but obviously food safety is our theme today.
Thank you. I just, one of the four things that I also wanted to touch upon is that we spoke about how consumer trust is shaken when these recalls are happening. What can companies do to alleviate some of that mistrust? I mean, they are trying their best to make sure the food is safe. Despite that, sometimes recalls happen. Any suggestions on how companies can deal with that? Amanda, I know Maple Leaf went through a big thing. Maybe you can start off this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think transparency is key, right? So being very open and honest with your consumers after events happen, to be transparent about, hey, we had a problem, and this is all of the things that we're doing to fix it. And really continued trust is gained by, continued good performance, right? And compliance.
And doubling down on whatever needs to be doubled down, right? If you miss certain checks and balances, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Megan, you mentioned about CFI coming up with new communication tools to make sure recalls are not the scary thing that they sound. Anything else, any suggestions and advice you have for manufacturers?
I think like Amanda mentioned, transparency is key. I know at CFI, when it comes to transparency, we have different monitoring programs. So for allergen, chemicals, microbiological hazards as well. And our labs do monitoring programs throughout the year, and we publish all of that on our website as well. So, consumers, industry, academia, they could go on the CFI website and see what we tested this year. What were the positives, what were the negatives, what type of commodities, what type of foods, and what type of hazards. So we do have several reports like that are online and accessible, and we try to be as transparent as possible. And like I say, when it comes to our recalls, we try to put all the necessary information that consumers and everybody needs so they could properly identify if they have any food that's targeted by a recall at home.
Thank you, Megan. Lahan, you're on the supplier side of things. I mean, your clients are processors. What are some of the feedback or suggestions that you have for them that they can use?
Yeah, well, we said transparency, and it's like a minority that are negligent. Most of them, it's an accident. It's not a lacking of effort. It's not lacking of willingness. It's an accident. And so just to be able to be transparent about, okay, where did it went wrong? What have we learned from that? Sharing those learning means that you're proactive about it. And also sharing what are you doing to improve? Like, what's the corrective action that you're putting in place to correct these incidents? I think that just shows that you're proactive to correct that. We've seen a lot of recalls that were, let's say, toward, let's say, an end user product. There was a lot of recalls coming from the US where it was third parties, and for them it's just tragic. It can be the end of the company itself, because it's just shake your whole and all your buyers, all your suppliers. Well, to call us recall can kill you. So for these companies, it's just like, yeah, I need to be proactive. I need to show transparency, because that's the only way I'm gonna be able to gain back that confidence in my process, in the way we work, in the way that we're not trying to cut corners, we're trying to improve every time there's an incident. So it's really that whole dynamic that you have to put in place, but it takes time. When you have an incident, it sticks on you for years and years, and you write the name of your company on Google, and it's always going to be related to that incident. So it sticks. So it's always a long process after that. So that's I think for the whole industry is just learn from the others, learn from the errors that were made by the other manufacturer, and don't repeat them. Like, that fail once, don't fail twice.
Yeah. There are a couple things that we implemented internally after the 2008 recall to really increase that transparency and build food safety culture within our company. One of those things was having what we call our 8:30 call. It's 3 days a week. Everyone in the organization, from operations to FSQA to senior leadership, is on this call. And we talk about incidents that we've had within the network. We talk about environmental positives. We talk about failures, near misses, things that have happened at the plant, and share these in a very transparent way with all of the plants in our network, so that we can all learn. And so that we make sure that, what was a near miss doesn't become something more serious at other facilities. And so that's really helped with kind of that transparent and open culture in terms of food safety, and really talking about things that happen and learning from our mistakes internally, as well as sharing those externally too.
Thanks, Amanda. And I think, Amy, you've written about that in your columns, right? You've spoken about the need for an entire company-wide food safety culture.
I like how Amanda is raising it's an old manufacturing concept, but the idea of a quality circle, that there's a peer-to-peer led conversation that is honest and frank, and the peers come together and say, here's my problem. And there's not a sense of walking around and blaming, but instead saying, what's the fastest way to solve this problem and to prevent this problem from ever occurring again? And it comes from Kaori Ishikawa. My students are bit by bit coming into the classroom right now, and they know how much I love this principle. But the idea that you build a circle, a team that gets together and has these frank conversations. In Amanda's case, it's a phone call. In other cases, it may be a small company. And what we at the Technology Access Centers try to do is, when it's a really small company and they don't have that peer-to-peer support, that they have the ability to pick up the phone and call someone like myself and have a frank conversation and say, what's your second opinion? And that education piece, I think, is really important, to have experts out there that are able to give a second opinion to help move the company forward with de-risking and improving their business outcomes.
Thank you, Amy. Before we dive deep into food safety compliance issues, I just want to, talk about one thing that's been top of mind of all of people over here. One is, we have a great food safety system, but I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure there are things that we can do to fix, there are things that we can improve on. The Globe and Mail article investigation spoke about the ERA model. Amy raised it up as well a little earlier. So Megan, I want to start with you. I mean, are there ways in which, are there any systemic challenges that we need to address and improve? What are the discussions that's happening at CFIA around that?
That's a very good question.
Quite complicated. Sorry for putting you on the
Yes,
spot
no,
there.
I think we've kind of touched upon it a little bit throughout this call, right? Like, we know the ERA model there's our Inspector General's office is doing a review of it right now. So there's several different groups in our science branch, operations branch, our policy and programs branch. There's so many different groups always working on how to improve food safety. So like I don't think there's ever just one metric or one system that we use to, you know, do inspection planning or, you know, to kind of to the drive the direction of our work, right? It really is, we look at it through like a whole improvement lens, so on all systems. So, you know, like at the Office of Food Safety and Recall, where I work, like we work with the inspectorate and the inspectors who are on the front line, and like how do we make their work easier to make them more efficient as well, because that will help their work and then it also helps industry as well. You know, same thing with our labs at CFI and science branch and the monitoring programs. You know, they change them every year based on new hazard and food combinations that we have. The ERA model, there's so many different data points. It's, you know, that fills into that model that helps with the ranking and prioritization. We have over 8,000 establishments that are licensed, and I think about half of those are manufactured foods alone. So there's a lot of different groups, and there's so many different wheels of improvement that's just ongoing at I guess so many different steps and levels. So like I can't speak on, you know, one specifically, but no, it really is a group effort. And, you know, just conversations like this with industry and with academia as well, like food safety, it isn't just CFIA, it isn't just the businesses. It really is all of us that have to work together to ensure that the food supply is safe and that Canadians have access to safe, high quality food.
Thank you, Megan. Yes,
One of the challenges is that CFIA has a bit of a challenge that they can't counsel the establishment. And so the CFIA provides a high level of leadership, but it's not intended to be providing singular advice to individual establishments or individual processors. And that's always a challenge. In many other countries, there is an aspect of educational extension where governments have a secondary arm's length wing that provides that one-on-one counseling. I'd like to say that the technology access centers at the colleges are part of the education strategy, but it's still not quite at the same level as extension that occurs within some other countries. And so this is always going to be a bit of a gap. We used to have extension back in the 90s and it was cut by the government. Extension, I think, is really, really vital for business development at the small business level.
good to know, Amy. Lahan, what are your thoughts?
Honest and way more expert than I am on this subject, so
Yeah. Amanda?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed in the chat, but Carol mentioned about how Maple Leaf handled the Listeria 2008 incident has been held up in some American associations as a gold standard. So naturally,
I teach it in my own classes.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat, so I didn't see any of the commentary. I think another thing that you know, in terms of like transparency and sharing knowledge, Maple Leaf hosts a food safety symposium every year that we bring in people from the CFIA, from academia, and from the industry. And kind of have a day-long summit essentially to discuss current issues in food safety, like what have we learned from our past mistakes and that type of thing. So yeah, the company is very open and transparent with sharing lessons learned. And it's interesting to hear from someone in the audience about the incidents that are taught in academia. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to have a quick a small refresher with whatever little time I have. I want to talk about what are the current regulatory frameworks and compliance requirements for food safety in Canada. Megan?
Sorry, you just want to talk about the current frameworks in
Yes,
Canada?
I mean, if there's anything that you want, anything, there are a lot, but some things that they can take away today.
Well, I think the SFCR, the Safe Food for Canadian Regulations, that's, you know, it's our new licensing system to make sure that food that is manufactured, imported, export, you know, across borders, we have kind of a way to measure that. And again, like we're always, improving and like changing and trying to work with industry and academia to make our system better. But on our website, we have a lot of different tools as well. I know we were talking about education. Um, we do want to have the tools available for industry to make informed decisions, and we try to guide them, but they are the experts in the food that they are making, right? Like it is their food, it's their production line, they know the volumes, they know what their clients need. So we try to to make sure that they're able to kind of have a bit of control, right, and not to overstep too much. But we work with Health Canada on policies like the Listeria policy on ready-to-eat foods. We have different policies on other types of meats, E. coli, salmonella, and like same thing with allergens. We work with Health Canada on different labeling initiatives. We work with the Public Health Agency of Canada on outbreak response. So, when it comes to the framework, I think at CFI, like we do work with our federal partners and also at a provincial level as well. But no, I think I've mentioned this a few times, but it's great to work with industry and academia and hear different perspectives on how to what is needed, what is missing from CFRA, what are some of the gaps, what are some of the challenges, and of course, we always take that information to inform our decisions or our policies or our work going forward.
Thank you.
And just honestly,
Yes.
just chapeau to CFIA and Health Canada, because coming back from Boston Seafood Show, I had 3 times the comments that from food processor who say that they have better access to information through the Canadian regulation than the American one. It was easier to get info about Listeria control prevention through the Listeria policy that just came out, so it was just easier to have access. So just on that, I think that's a huge edge compared to other countries. Just this access to info and critical thinking and how to make decisions related to the risk based on the product. So
It's
Thank
good
you.
to hear.
It is. We've touched upon, my next question is about some common sources and process failures that lead to food recalls. You've all touched upon it throughout this conversation, but is there something else that you want to add? I know, Lohan, you spoke about cross-contamination. Anything else?
plenty of stuff, and like we've said it, Canada is small and medium companies, so nobody like most of them doesn't have like the rigorous program like Maple Leaf could have. It's still learning for most of them. I think 2 things that we saw in the last couple of years coming and seeing companies. There's 2 things that is still toxic and needs to be either through education got to be removed. The risk assessment based on historic. The number of time I went and met a good company or asked them, what's your risk assessment for Listeria? And the answer was, well, I never got Listeria, so I won't get Listeria. Just that risk assessment. And the number of time I've heard, well, knock on wood, it won't happen. Oh boy, it's just like terrible assessment. And I hear that comment so many times. The other thing that is still something that needs to change in the culture that we work with small companies. Too often, let's say the quality manager is under the production manager. So every time there's a new project regarding quality, the quality manager doesn't have a budget, doesn't have the liberty to take action, to put new step, needs to push his project through production, and production is always looking at the project as just efficiency. Will this initiative make more output? And it's always no, it's just that we're improving quality, we're making sure. So most time gets rejected. And that dynamic, it's highly toxic in a quality culture, and it's still happening. It's still out there. It's still a higher risk for those small and medium companies. These 2 things definitely needs to evolve. There's a lot of education still to be done. And we see it every day. It's still out there. So clearly, like, yes, big companies, they have this great culture, this great policy, but for most small and medium companies, that's still something that's terribly lacking.
Thank you, Lohan. Amy, I feel like you want to say something. You want to
Yeah, I'm really resonating with Laurent's comments about the fact that Canada is trying incredibly hard and investing heavily in product innovation. So we're not just making commodities anymore. Once upon a time, all these risk assessments were based off of the classic commodities, meat, dairy, honey, eggs, etc. And now we've got all these complex processed products that don't have the same level of complex risk assessment. And as such, again, where do we see most of this product innovation? It's with small companies that are then merged and acquired by larger companies. This is the pattern that we see in Canada. Those small companies, again, lacking bench strength. Do we have the systems to do that comprehensive risk assessment? I think back to when crickets were one of the hot new ingredients, and we kept saying, well, how do we do a risk assessment? What are the foodborne illness scenarios related to this? And hitting the wall over and over and over again because there were not those resources that were centralized and validated by high level authorities, government authorities, and so on. And that became a barrier for many of the companies who were interested in doing innovation in that space. Because again, as small companies, they don't have the capital to go and do the high level of risk assessment necessary, the process validation, and so on.
Thank you, Amy. Amanda, I know you're not a small and medium business companies, but obviously there are some things that you can.
No, but I'm smiling about the cricket comment because I
Yeah.
remember in a previous company looking for some information, and I think the World Health Organization had a pretty detailed document about insects and consumption worldwide and how, you know, the different food safety hazards that can pop up with those. But anyway, different topic. Yeah, a couple of the things that you know, Maple Leaf focused on in terms of you know, identifying the main causes for recalls and failures, and then things that need to change. The first would be the food safety culture of an organization, right? And then second, training. And Laurent mentioned, you know, the training aspect and really making sure that people understand their products and their processes and what goes into it, but also not just leadership, but folks on the floor and really understanding, you know, when to raise their hand to say that this isn't right or that something is questionable, and having that empowerment to be able to say that. One of the resources that's available, and we kind of talk about small and medium companies, there's a free resource available called Stop Foodborne Illness and the Stop Alliance. And they have a food culture toolkit that's available for companies. So you can go to their website and download this toolkit. And what it has is a number of stories of people who've actually suffered from a foodborne illness or had an incident within their family. And it really turns it into something very personal and related to, you know, people and experience that people had. And that tends to resonate with a lot of employees, you know, frontline workers, everyone, right? Because it is an actual person and a story that you can think about. So yeah, that's something I would recommend to small and medium companies, is to look at Stop Foodborne Illness or the Stop Alliance and get those resources.
Thank you, Amanda. Megan?
I don't think I have anything to add. That was great.
Yes, they've covered quite a bit. We have a few minutes left, so I want to ask a couple of things. One, I want to find out what are some emerging technologies that are available to enhance food safety, you know, programs within companies. Lahan, you're an emerging company with a patented product, so maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, of course, there's plenty of technologies. I'll talk about mine, of course. I love it. But so we work with bacteria since, so that's one of the technologies that we're pushing more and more. Mostly, like a lot of technologies we see more and more are processing aids. Processing aid because there's such a tendency to remove ingredients that ingredients are not anymore a way to protect your food product, because consumers are always trying to get clean label, clean label, clean label. So the only avenue left are processing aids. On our side, we're able to develop a technology against Listeria through processing aid status as well with the protein. And our focus with that is really to target that risk in between cook step and packaging, because again, that's a big risk. Yes, you have your control in terms of environmental control, but it's always that if I'm doing a good job of environmental, then there shouldn't be an issue, but the if is still there. So trying to add this new barrier in that sector where that's a big risk for the ready-to-eat product. I'm talking about bacteria since there's been great technologies out there. Our competitors, PhageGuard with the phages as well. We see a lot of more and more HPP as well as post-treatment in the packaging. So there's a lot of technologies, I think. one of the key takeout and with those technologies as well is the access to data, to be able to create challenge tests and challenge studies to prove that is your technology really that efficient? Is Listeria going to grow on the product throughout shelf life, or is there really an inhibition? And there's a lot of, let's say, formulation that are still based on only pH, water activity, but there's a ton of variables that gets into the inhibition or the non-growth of bacteria. So to be able to do those challenge studies and be able to prove that, and I think the new Listeria policy is a great example of that, because it gives a little bit the keys to professor to show us the data, show us that you're in control, and we'll base that risk assessment on the data that you're able to provide, and show that it's not based on just two variables within your formulation. No, there's plenty of variables that makes food safety work. So there's a lot of opportunities. It's really to put the data, test it, and really show efficacy.
Thank you, Laurent. I know, Amanda, you were talking about data as well, right? When we were discussing technologies.
Yeah, it's really all of our companies collect so much information, right, in terms of process and performance, and really having the tools available to be able to analyze that data quickly and use that data to make quick changes on the fly, or adjust processes over time. So yeah, really using the data and using technology to analyze the data that we have. It will also be interesting, like another emerging technology is AI, of course. And so, how will that be utilized in some of the things we've already talked about on this call, I think, in terms of like risk assessments, could that be, it's scary, right? I saw Amy's face. Can't always be trusted, but yeah, so I think that's something else that's coming up that will be interesting to see how the industry uses it.
I wrote a column a few months ago on using generative AI for risk assessment and HACCP-related activities. And in some cases, it worked well. Again, we were using standard generative AI, Copilot, Gemini, and ChatGPT, and not any of the software as service type platforms that is a technology that's really, really intriguing. Software as service using generative AI, but we just use the straight up, had my students ask some different questions about risk assessment, and most of the time it fell flat on its face. And the risk assessment was not functioning as it should. We were doing basic ones like, what's the risk assessment for ham? Or processed apple juice, and completely silly responses. When it came to writing standard operating procedures following standard global food safety codes such as SQF, it actually did a half decent job. And 80% of the time, roughly, the SOPs were reasonably good, and then would only require minor editing. And so we also looked at it from a HACCP preventive control design perspective, and it was able to give the backbone structure of a HACCP plan, not a full HACCP plan, but it would allow for, again, that streamlining. And so I think these are some of the tools that small businesses will find incredibly useful, because again, lacking bench strength in terms of subject matter experts, unlike the large companies that can bring in folks like Amanda. Small businesses need all these different tools and resources to be able to do things effectively. But as for risk assessment, it's still really, really important to have that consensus building with other subject matter experts to be able to really find what the answer is.
Absolutely. Use it with caution.
Yes, absolutely. We only have a few minutes left, but I really wanted to ask this last question. And, climate change is affecting the way food is grown and produced, and obviously it's going to have an impact on food safety as well. So I wanted to get everyone's input on perspective on that. How do you think it's going to impact, and what additional measures do you think that we need to put in place to address climate change? Megan, I'll start with you.
I think that my group right now, that's currently outside of the scope of my current work, but like I know we are always, again, like monitoring for type of trends, emerging hazards, any type of food hazard combination. So there is work at CFA that is being done on different types of emerging hazards. I'm sure specifically for climate change it's included in that, but that's currently outside of what the work I've been working on. So I'll let the others comment.
No worries, Megan. Thank you. Lohan, I know when we spoke, you spoke about how much climate change is impacting some of the foods that, that uh, industries that you work with. So please go ahead and share your feed.
Yeah, there's two scenarios where it was clear, and it was clear as day that the impact seafood. Seafood, they see it when they start their season on the East Coast. There's almost no presence of listeria in the water, in the raw material. And then the more the season goes, the more we tend to June, July, hotter water temperature, then you got listeria every time you test the product, every time you test the water where it's fished or the initial product. So it's just the best evidence that yes, it's seasonal, but it's the best evidence that the warmer it gets, the more prevalence of those pathogens you'll get through a warmer water. When we talk about listeria, it's always in the water. And we've seen it also in veggies in the field with irrigation water. The more it gets, the hotter it gets, the more bacterial load there's going to be. And when we get in the field, say for lettuce, veggies, you spray the whole field with a water that is clearly not filtered, that is clearly not clean, and you're just propagating the full load on all the veggies out there. And that's something that's going to be a lot and more problem for those very fragile product, because it's talking going back to veggies. Not much you can do on those products. You can't cook it. You can't high pressure them. There's no ingredient. It's raw material. So it's just cleaning, washing. But then if in the field you're spraying contaminated water, you're done. So it's two scenarios, and there's going to be plenty more, but two event stories where, well, it just shows the impact of those climate change and getting warmer and warmer.
Thank you, Lohan, for sharing those. Amanda?
In terms of climate change, I think that our company focuses on how we can lessen our impact on the environment, especially from a sustainability standpoint. We are a carbon neutral company, and so we want to make sure that we're able to do business while lessening our impact on the environment. And, using less water, using less resources, making sure that, we're being kind to the earth and, not, we're leaving it better than when we found it.
Thank you, Amanda. Amy?
I was at a food safety summit in Dubai back in the fall, and one of the key discussions about climate change was forecasting models and using AI and web crawling technology to be able to start to predict when incidences are going to occur. And this is much about climate change as it also is about geopolitical tensions. Using some of these proprietary models, larger companies were able to start to build forecasting models and predict in advance of incidents occurring when they felt that the risk was increasing. This inevitably, I kept saying, well, how about our small companies in Canada? And it begs that question, at what point do organizations like CFIA start to say, this becomes a public good, something that is important for the success of our companies in Canada? Just throwing that out there as an idea for a future brainstorm and perhaps a new budget. But inevitably, AI and some of the large data analysis methods that are emerging are going to be really influencing food safety in the near future.
Thank you, Amy, for that. Megan, there are some proposals and ideas for you to take back to your group, I guess.
Definitely, yes.
Thank you. Well, on that note, I want to thank Amanda, Amy, and Laurent and Megan for your time and for your insights into the complex world of food safety. Many thanks to our sponsor, Biomera, your trusted partner in augmented diagnostics. In close partnership with customers, Biomera has worked with leading global food and beverage companies to develop their augmented diagnostics approach. This innovative approach enhances the precision and effectiveness of safety and quality control programs throughout the entire production value chain and enables their customers to anticipate emerging risks and take full control of their operations. Augmented diagnostics is a combination of cutting-edge testing technologies covering microbiology and molecular biology, and the latest data science and genomic capabilities, all pioneered by Biomera's innovative spirit. Thanks, Biomera, for your support in putting together today's webinar. A reminder that a recorded video of this presentation and discussion will be emailed to attendees over the next few days. Before you leave, please share your feedback about this webinar in the survey that will pop up after the broadcast ends. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the rest of the day.